Thank you for sticking around. As I announced earlier, this is an introduction to data and how to get access to data in the Federal Statistical Research Data Center. I think Gina has all the details, so I am just going to quickly introduce her. Gina Erickson is the administrator for the Minnesota FSRDC. We're really lucky to have her. She has many years of experience with FSRDC data. Her training or background is in sociology, but she's been working in federal data for a long time. So she's had a chance to interact with all the different kinds of resources that are available. We're going to get started. We have folks online, so I'll turn it over to Gina. Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm Gina Erickson, as Kathy said. I am more than happy to treat this as a workshop for you to stop me and ask questions if you have any questions about anything specifically that I'm saying. I'm planning to talk, give an overview of some of the data that's here, but really, kind of get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of how do you write a proposal and what does it look like. But so again, please feel free to stop me if you have any questions. Okay, yes, thank you. We are on Zoom right now, so if anyone there has questions, please type them in and we will get to those, and then we'll try and get the audience questions here recorded, or not recorded, but amplified on the microphone. So by this point, some of you have you've probably heard about data in the FSRDCs and what's available in the FSRDCs. But what we are a network of secure computing facilities that I gave up trying to count how many we have because it's a little bit of a moving target at this point. What you call a center at this point, or what is an open center at this point, is it's been held up a little bit by the federal hiring freeze. So we have some that are online and less officially open. So so there's about 35. They are around the country. The red dots are just the newest ones at Ohio State, in Indiana, and at Iowa. We also have one in Puerto Rico now. So we are a network of labs. In some ways, we are a glorified computer lab. But what we do is we mimic the security conditions of the headquarters facility. So all the data security that would go into working on site at headquarters is mimicked in these labs around the country. Many are in universities. I would say maybe at this point, most are in universities. And then there are some that are located in Federal Reserve banks and the Federal Reserve Board. And then there is one at MBER in Boston. So they are managed by the Census Bureau. I am a Census Bureau employee working on campus here at Minnesota. That is the relationship of all administrators to their home institutions. We're census employees. At some point in the past, we moved from a census RDC to a federal research data center, statistical research data center, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means and some of the other agency data that we have available in the RDCs. So I'll say RDC and FSRDC, and I'm using them interchangeably. So RDCs were designed so that you could access census data and data from other statistical agencies that is not otherwise available. I've said already it's a secure facility, and what this means is that you are working on a closed network. Your computing system is closed. There is no internet access beyond, your direct line to our servers. So it creates some challenges. I mean, you can't Google your code while you're working. And then all of our output, it's a little bit, I say it's a little bit like a Hotel California where you can get stuff in, but getting it out is a little harder. So everything will go through a disclosure avoidance review process to ensure that no confidential information is released. And then all of our facilities, which have a Census Bureau employee on staff, which again is why I say I'm not quite sure what's open at this point because it's been tricky to get some of the ones that were in the pipeline online. So we have several types of, I'm going to speak now about census data. So the next few slides are all about the census data we have available. We have economic data, which includes firm and establishment censuses and surveys, including the longitudinal business database. We have lots of demographic microdata available. I have slides on each of these, so I'm going to go a little quick here, but then I'll come back. We have several data products, the LEHD, which links employer and employee data, UMetrics, which is university grant data, CJARS data, which is criminal justice administrative records linked to other data. The MDAC, I can't remember her name, but she was from the National Institute of Health yesterday, mentioned this, this data, which is the ACS linked to National Death Index, so you can get cause of death. And then we have some other surveys as well. So why does someone use this and not all the great publicly available data? For some things, it's the only microdata available. The RDCs grew out of economic research because if you are in an economic census, it means you have filed taxes as a business. For us, filing taxes as a business is in and of itself a confidential piece of information. So there are no PUMS files available for economic data. So that's sort of the birth of the RDC network was out of the need for record level data on firms and establishments. Further, we have access to register data, including the business register and the master address file, so we can do some longitudinal linking. And then inside the FSRDC, you can link different data sets than you can. And I'll speak more about that in detail. On the demographic side, we have individual and household data with less top coding or censoring. We have additional variables that you can't get in other places, including date of birth. So we've had projects in the RDCs before that have looked at things like your Vietnam draft status based on, and we needed a date of birth. You need a full date of birth to get some of that information. And for many data sets, it's a larger sample, obviously, than the PUMS file. We have definitely more detailed geography on a lot of the data sets than publicly available. And then, of course, there's the linking that we've talked about. And I'll say more in a minute. So this is some of our more popular demographic data. It's kind of all the usual contenders that you would expect. Some that you might not be as familiar with, though, the SSA Numident is in here. I suspect you know about this. But we have the household composition key, which is linking kid pics to parent pics. And then we can link that to addresses as well, people to addresses in the MOF, the master address file extract, and then the auxiliary reference, which is where we can link people to these files. The mortality disparities in American community, I think that it was a little optimistic, the timeline we heard about the MDAC data by the end of the year. That might be the case that it will be done then, but it won't necessarily be available. So if you're interested specifically in that, I think we're looking at maybe closer to 9 months to a year, but I'm happy to say more as we hear that, as that comes through. We have additionally to some of the census data, we have state SNAP-WIC and TANF files. We have the longitudinal mortality study, children's health study. We have the household pulse survey, which started during COVID. We have SIP data, and then we have a few surveys that have been ingested by the Census Bureau and picked, as we would say. So the Moving to Opportunity study is it was a completed survey that HUD completed, identifying people who were given a voucher to move to a low poverty area or to stay in their current public housing. That survey wound up, at least 10 years ago, if not longer than that, but because of picking that data, when we ingest it, we can now extend that time series out into the data that we have more recently available, at least for the data that we do have available, the Numident or the ACS. The same thing will go with the Future of Families and Child Wellbeing study that is actually now available. This TBD is now outdated, so that's good. And this was the Fragile Families study, and then the National Crime Victimization Survey. So to link our data, the person level links are available via the PIC, which I know we've heard plenty about. You can also, this is a heavier lift, but we can also ingest your data and pick that data. That process is a little bit more burdensome and has some costs associated with it. So just know that that's not quite as easy as the other linkages. The other linkages to bring in firm or establishment level data and link businesses have more readily available identifiers to link them. And then we can link by geography. And this includes, then we can merge external data onto our internal data. So if I want to study, out, health outcomes and I'm using the ACS and I want to have some contextual variables that aren't otherwise available, I can bring in data at the county level that might have, hospitals or physicians per capita or something like that. I can bring that data in and then merge it to the records at the county level or at whatever level of geography you're interested in. We have people that do that with, lots of different kinds of spatial data, including boundary files. We can link those GIS boundary files as well. So we have the master address file, which allows us to link to by geography. That has a linking variable called the MOF ID. The PIC we've heard a lot about. I have a slide at the end that I can reiterate some of this for you, but the historical data is available publicly up to 1940. And that's our key linkage file, is that 1940 file. So on the IPUMS side, if you bring in the 1940 HIST ID, you can link to the 1940, the HIST ID is on the internal 1940 files, and then we have this gap of time that Katie and Trent's team is working on creating the PICs for and creating the data, the full data for. And so once we have that, you'll have a complete time series through the census. But right now it's any older linkages pre-1940 or earlier will require linking to the 1940 and then jumping ahead to the currently available data on ACS, decennial, things like that. So we have PICs available on lots of our data sets. I've mentioned most of these already. About 80 to 90% of the samples are picked. That's kind of a rough estimate on the picking rates. And for some data sets, not all years are picked, not all CPS files are picked, things like that. So you do definitely want to work with your RDC administrator on your proposal. And again, I'll get to the nitty-gritty on that. This is what our longitudinal linking infrastructure looks like in the FSRDCs. So we have the 1850 to 1930 censuses available, plus that 1940, that kind of magic linking year. 50 to 90 are being created right now. 2000 to 2020 are available. We also have the ACS files available. All of those can be linked via PICs to some of our survey products. Our survey products and the census and ACS are linked to administrative records. And then all of those can be linked to any user-provided data that you would have and get picked or otherwise merge onto our data. If you have, some county records that you want to do some analysis or something at a zip code level or something, we can merge that on. There's no cost to merge external files at a geographic level. If we're not creating a PIC for you, there's no cost to bring in your data. We have the Numident. Many of you are familiar with that. This household composition key links the PICs of children born beginning in 1996 to the PICs of their parents. The master address, the MOF-ARF as we call it, links IDs or MOF IDs to individual PICs so we can track annual residents beginning in 2000. We have SSA data for CPS and SIP respondents. We have the 1040 data that was mentioned yesterday for these 5-year waves from 1969 to 1994. Those have been picked. Other data sets with PICs, SNAP, WIC, and TANF data, access varies by state, but those have PICs on them. The Criminal Justice Administrative Record System out of the University of Michigan is data that is picked. That is, I don't want to say necessarily complicated to use, but it's complicated to explain what might be available to any one project because it varies quite a bit by state in terms of the adjudication level of a case and what data are included by states, whether it's charge data, whether it's in inmate data or incarceration data, it varies by states. UMetrics data links grants provided at an institutional level. So we have information on university grants. I'm not sure if 32 is still current. And the people paid on the grants and the businesses paid by the grants. This can be linked to internal census data on individuals and firms. Some of this is used to study innovation, so we can see, where people went to school. We can see networks of people who have worked together and where they end up. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our economic data, but I know there are some economists here. We forgive you. So our economic data we have at both firm and establishment level. And so those include the economic censuses. Those are conducted in the 2 and 7 years in the United States. The annual surveys, manufacturing, services, et cetera, those will have both firm and establishment identifiers. The standard statistical establishment list, or the SSEL, and is the business register. It allows you to link businesses over time. And then we have some other data, quarterly financial reports. We have firm data, we have patent data that's not on here, and some of that patent data is picked as well. So if you're interested in studying innovation, you can see patents linked to people. We do have linked data between economic and individual records. That's our LEHD project. It links individuals to their place of employment using unemployment insurance administrative records provided by states. So this data is provisioned at the state level. So access to this would be on a state-by-state basis. Most people end up applying for access to all, any state that they can get, and then you get what states you get. That's kind of the way this data set works. You can link to other census data by firm identifier. You can link this is picked as well, so you would have an individual identifier. And this essentially tracks a person based on their place of employment. It's linked to ACS records. So you can get characteristics of people and their jobs matched to their employers. We have data from partner agencies now, and this is kind of one of the, what makes us now a federal statistical research data center, not just a census research data center. This is a moving target so maybe don't take a picture of this because it could change, or maybe it has changed already. So it's a little bit of a moving target as agencies negotiate some priority and staffing changes since in 2025. So some of this is a little moving, but in the past, these were the statistical agencies. One of them that we end up with, which is a little bit mixed between what we call would be a census product and what would be an agency product, is the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. The MEPS data, we have various components, some provisioned by the Census Bureau and some provisioned by AHRQ. National Center for Health Statistics, those projects are a little bit different. Then their data is available, but the process is different than what I'm going to explain today. So if you're interested in working with NCHS data in an RDC, you might just want to reach out to me or your friendly local administrator and ask them about NCHS projects. You can also go directly to the CDC site here, and they will provide information. But this data is a little different than the rest of it. But lots of NCHS data available. The National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics makes data available. Much of it is picked. The Survey of Earned Doctorates, the Survey of Doctoral Recipients, the National Survey of College Graduates. Some of that then can be linked to the other data within the Census Bureau picked network. We have data from EEOC on employment discrimination charges filed by individuals. Lots of that is picked as well. We have BEA data. I think we still have BEA data. So I'm going to turn now to talk less about the data and then more about what it means to work on an RDC project. So an RDC application looks a little bit like this. You would go and figure out what data you need. Once you know you need the data and you know you need an internal file or a restricted use file, you're going to work with your administrator to develop a proposal. It might not actually be the FSRDC administrator. In the case of that NCHS data, you're going to work with NCHS to develop your proposal. And some of the AHRQ data will go, the application will go to them. Then you're going to submit your application via the standard application process. It might be portal, I don't know, portal or process. It's the SAP or the SAP, as we call it. It's hosted at researchdata.gov.org. So if you hear me or an administrator that you're working on say SAP or RDG, they're going to be the same thing. We're sort of using those interchangeably, but it's the web interface that you submit your proposal, and I have an example coming up. After that, you're going to do this application for special sworn status. After you've submitted your proposal and it's been reviewed and approved, then you would apply for what we call special sworn status. And this essentially makes you a bit of an unpaid contractor for the Census Bureau who's going to come on and do some research for us. The trick here about all of this research in an FSRDC, at least using census data, is that it requires you to provide some benefit to the Census Bureau. It requires that your project produces some benefit to the Census Bureau. That is, it's not necessarily a low bar, but it is an attainable bar for projects. So the role of the administrator is to help you think about the benefits and how your project might produce a benefit. A lot of times that's doing something that we are not doing, which are producing the estimates that you want to produce because we are not producing those currently. Another thing might be to bring in the data that you want to link because we are definitely not doing that right now. And so bringing in your external data enhances our data, and that is one way to provide a benefit as well. Some RDCs, depending on how they are funded, may charge fees to their users, and that is institution specific. I can't even give you an idea. I just don't know enough. Kathy is our executive director here. So she is essentially the liaison between the host institution or institutions in the case of what we would call a consortium and the Census Bureau. So essentially I'm a contractor, right? I am a census employee on site here doing census work at the University of Minnesota in much the way contractors are in other businesses. And Kathy's the one that sort of facilitates that. Both the space and then my employment. She also handles the fees, and it's not even above my pay grade. It is outside my pay grade because it's the university that does that, and I am on the census side. So, or it's the host institution, whomever it might be, or whatever it might be. I don't want to put you on the spot. Sorry.
I'm just gonna jump in. The fees do vary at FSRDCs. The one thing I was going to say earlier, I think the first question was that from someone at Maryland. So it's not universal, but if it is hosted on your campus, there's a good chance it's available to people on your campus at a either no fee or or a reduced fee of some kind. I don't know that's the case in all instances, but if there is a FSRDC located at your institution, or your institution is a consortium member of an FSRDC, which expands broadly the number of institutions we're talking about, I think that reduces the chance that there will be a significant fee. And I can take individual questions afterward.
Yeah, I don't think I have a slide here, but I think the network of consortium members, so our RDC in Minnesota is hosted at the University of Minnesota. The Federal Reserve Bank in Minnesota or Minneapolis, I can't remember if it's Minnesota or Minneapolis, is also a member of our consortium. So their users use the RDC here on campus. The one in Chicago is at the Federal Reserve Bank, but researchers from the University of Chicago use that RDC. And so they're all sort of, there are lots of institutional relationships that are not just the 30 to 35 centers. I think the total count of sort of institutions with an affiliation with an RDC is like 180 or 190 or something, including some nonprofit agencies that participate in as a consortium member for some other RDCs. So where do you start? If you're interested in an RDC proposal, you're going to learn about your university partnerships, identify your nearest RDC, and then contact that administrator. Searching FSRDC will take you to a page that will show you and give you contact information to the administrator at that site. Usually the process involves, give us like a 2-page summary. You can start exchanging some emails, but the first thing an RDC administrator is going to ask for is just a 2-page synopsis of what you want to do. And that will include your research ideas, why you need restricted use. I mean, we just want to make sure you need this. Ideally, you don't need an RDC, right? I mean, your life is easier if you can do your research outside of an RDC. But we want to know that you need it, and then what kind of data you'll be linking and what level those linkages will be at, and some idea about your methodology. We just want to make sure that it's feasible in our center. And then learn all you can about the data. That's kind of the next step. Go to the data pages on the Census Bureau website, go to researchdata.gov, read any key papers, including those census working papers about this. So how do you start? How do you use researchdata.gov? I'm pulling it up here. I have other, get it maximized. Okay, so this top is going to give you a bunch of warnings. It's It's basically explaining that we are a moving target on data availability by agencies. Once you get down to here, you will put in a keyword. You can search for topics. You can search for specific surveys. I walked through the National Survey of Children's Health because people had asked about that yesterday. And then somebody reached out to their local RDC administrator already today. So that was very exciting to hear that that outreach happened so quickly. So if I put in, let's say, children's health here, and then search, to make clear, this is researchdata.gov.org. It's not .gov. It's a researchdata.gov.org. Right now, it's hosted. It was developed and hosted by the University of Michigan, and so it's still hosted on this .org site. I don't know if it'll move to a .gov site or not. I don't know what the long-term plans are for this, but so here I am, and I'm going to search for children's health. Again, all these warnings are going to keep popping up. And here's what I see. So I see the National Survey of Children's Health, which is the data that I'm interested in. The pick here, like probably most of our files, is going to be in a separate data set. So you can use this with or without the pick. If you want the pick, you only need that if you're going to link it to something else. If you do, then you would ask for the pick crosswalk for this survey or census, whatever the case may be, data set, I should say. So you'll go and select this National Survey of Children's Health, and I get some information about the data. You can read about it. You can read some. Most of this exporting metadata does not provide as much as you hope for, so just know that. Knowing what data, you're probably going to want to know what variables are available to you, and that's some of that is here, but usually you're better off trying to find that looking at a data web page or something from the providers. The key part that I want to show you here is if I go to detailed methodology and I scroll down, I can see some information about the survey, right? And then I go down and I see these linkage variables. And here, this tells me that this data set has a pick on it, it has track information, has all of these, so I can link by any of these. And these other is not super helpful, I understand that. The key part that I want to show you here is that if I click pick, this is hyperlinked, it's going to pull up for me all data sets that have pick on it. And in this case, I can see anything that would be linkable by pick. So now I can see the household pulse. If I wanted to link this to the National Survey of College Graduates, I could, right? I could link all of these. If they have a pick, they're linkable by a pick. Okay. I think that's all I have on that. I've given you these examples. So your census proposal has to meet some basic requirements. So after you provide that 2-page summary, we're going to say, great, go out and write a proposal. And you have to do this. You have to tell us, it's different than writing a grant. Most of you at this point in your careers are probably familiar with at least a grant application. If not having written one yourself, you understand the basic idea. Our proposals are different. We sort of trust that you have a good idea. So you're not trying to convince us that your idea is good and we should give you money. Instead, you're trying to convince us that you know what you want to do with our data and we should give you data. And that's a different sort of pitch in a proposal than you might be used to. So our literature reviews are not necessarily long at all. What we want to know instead is that you need non-publicly available data, that you are going to be focusing on statistical models and not tabular output. The Census Bureau has a special tabulation division that will produce some sort of special tabulations if you needed that. That's not the goal of an RDC project. Yesterday, Nick Gretz presented on some work that he's doing with the eviction lab. That is a different sort of project, and I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of that, but that is not, the work that he was presenting was not an RDC project in the traditional sense. So just know that that was an exception and not the rule for what an RDC project would look like. Instead, we're going to focus on tabular output. That's really what we were designed to do. We want to know that it's feasible. The legal requirements that protect your data, the data that the Census Bureau collects, are such that your work on the non-public versions has to produce some benefit for us. And we want to know something about the scientific merit, and depending on particularly the sample sizes for what you want to do. We're going to care a lot about you thinking through that you have enough sample and you have a large enough sample to do what you want to do, and that you are willing to work with us to maintain confidentiality of the data, whatever those standards might be. If that's thinking through a privacy budget or differential privacy on that sense, if it means working through pooling samples or pooling years of data, whatever that might be. But we need to know that your project is not hinging on this one county in Missouri, right? Because if that's the case, it's probably not going to happen. We do have minimums both for the number of people in the sample, but also the geographic size of the area you're describing. And again, you would work with your administrator to craft this proposal. And I say craft and not write because it is sort of it's a different animal. The bar is definitely highest for your first RDC project. After that, it's for many, many reasons, it's a lot easier. You know the data, you've used the data for one thing, but also the process is going to be shorter because you now have special sworn status, which I'll talk about in a minute. And here is part of it. The time frame is it can be long, right? Particularly for economic projects or projects that use data that is provisioned by states, like the LEHD or that SNAP, WIC, or TANF data. For census data, we are, I want to say obligated, that might be a little strong. We aim to hit a 12-week review time. So from the time your proposal gets submitted on research.data.gov, the Census Bureau would have 12 weeks to review your proposal. After that 12 weeks, if your data needs to be reviewed by another agency, whether that's NCSES for that survey of college graduates, whether that's IRS for any economic data, whether that's states for SNAP, WIC, or TANF data, those agencies, many of them would have another 12 weeks. In the case of LEHD, states then are not bound to a timeline. What it usually means is we just cut off. We say if you're not going to approve or not approve at some point, we're just going to say, let's just go ahead and take the 13 states that said yes, and then you move ahead with your data, with your project. So 12 weeks for Census Bureau review, up to 12 weeks for another agency review. And then it's a special sworn status application time, and that's another 3 to 4 months. So one of the good outcomes of the sort of cutback in federal staff from our perspective is that we are not onboarding anyone, which means that the Census Bureau investigative staff that is doing the background checks for our researchers is not also doing them for new employees. So our processing time is sped up a little bit for special sworn status researchers. So this 3 to 4 months is probably a longer estimate than it could be. What's missing in here in terms of the timeline is your work and your work with an RDC administrator to get some of your proposal going. So that is dependent on the RDC administrator's workload and your own time spent on this. So it has been the case where I've had someone come to me in December and be working by September, and that was on LEHD data, and they didn't have SSS. That was like the fastest turnaround, but it was mainly because they came to me with a fully developed proposal. They knew benefits, they knew every single variable and every single data set and how they were gonna link them, and I was like, well, my God, that was amazing. So that was the case that it went really fast because we essentially cut out any of that first timeline and got right to submitting it kind of right off the bat. But we typically would say plan a year. If you're going to start working on your RDC proposal now, plan to access it a year from now. That's a safe bet. It might not be the most accurate, but it's certainly probably a safe bet. Processing is a little bit longer for foreign nationals. We would describe someone who is not a U.S. citizen as a foreign national. That's the language we use. So it's a little bit longer, but there are no additional restrictions on foreign nationals besides the processing time, providing some additional documentation. We want to know you are here legally and have a legal work visa and things like that. I can send you, I have this in a PDF version as well, but this outlines the process. What we have here is this yellow. It looks a little different if you're going to submit data for an application to another agency for data. I can speak a little bit about that, but like I said, NCHS is a separate process, and some other data providers are a little bit different process than this typical census RDC process. Excuse me. So when you work in a lab, the majority of our projects are conducted entirely in an RDC lab. our data are located on our servers in Maryland. They're not in the RDC. So you access the data via a desktop thin client, which is essentially the desktop version of a Chromebook or similar, right? There is no hard drive really on the machines that are there. They are just a little box that are providing access to the internet. In this case, the internet is not actually the World Wide Web. It is the link to our servers, and that's the only place you're going to go. And so you will work in this. It's actually a Unix environment that you will work in. Our servers are in Unix. You don't need to know Unix or Unix command or any sort of version of Unix to work on our projects. But there's a couple nuances of working in Unix, but really it's just that copy paste doesn't work in SAS, some things like that. But otherwise, most people who don't know how to use Unix can move around in on our servers fairly easily. And then on the flip side, your project is going now and you want to get something out. You should plan, I would say, at least 4 to 6 weeks for review. So once you submit you have completed all of the necessary additional documentation for underlying sample sizes, and you've done all the rounding that we require you to do, and you're ready to disclose your results, then you should plan another 4 to 6 weeks probably before your files are going to be reviewed and ready for you. So Andy Fenelon presented yesterday on RDC data. That's the one I know the timeline for. And so he submitted that probably mid-June, I would say, to ensure that he had it in time. Actually, I thought this conference was a week earlier, so he said we need it by July 25th or something, because I thought, anyway. But yes, so we can hit a deadline, but we say, to be safe, allow yourself 4 to 6 weeks. We do have times where we try to prioritize. Let's say we have a lot of economists that use this, and so this is the time of year for economists and other disciplines where students are going on the job market. So we want to make sure that you can get your job market paper out. We want to make sure that you're going to have your data for job talks, things like that. So we want to make sure you can meet your R&R requirements. And we do have some ways to sort of prioritize things that have a hard deadline. But typically we can't really make many promises before a 4-week turnaround. So if you are a last minute worker, one, we're kindred spirits, but two, you have to change your ways a little bit in an RDC. Model, I've said this already, but model output is the expectation. Tabular output is really limited to supporting the model-based output. That's really the way that our projects work. New data is being added all the time, which hesitate even to print the poster for this, because we were always changing all the time. This is an old slide, right? We are changing even more in the current environment. So it helps to check back with an administrator frequently to see if data is available. We do also have ways, let's say you wanted to use the 1950 data and the 1960 data that we know we don't have picks for yet, or we don't have ready. You could submit a proposal right now that would say, I want to use, 1940 to 2020 censuses and include 50, 60, 70, 80 picks and the 2030 census when available, right? So we can write in sort of future data releases into your project. And then I guess I haven't said it yet, but most of our projects are 3 to 5 years, I would say, with the closer to 5 being more the modal category, the more modal time than the 3-year side. So it's a burden to get in, but once you're in, we sort of understand that this is a different working environment, and the projects just take longer. The data are bigger. Everything takes longer to run. It seems like a lot of work to get into the RDC, even though sometimes it's right down the hall, but it might be across campus. It might be halfway across your state. So we do have longer timelines than most projects. Usually that 5-year timeline would include probably 2 to 3 papers at, as not a minimum, but that's sort of the scope of an RDC project. We do have some data that's available via remote access. It's up to the data owning agency to determine this. Right now, it's most of the demographic data, excluding the SSA NUMIDENT file, and most of our economic data, excluding the LEHD files. So we do have remote access available. That is, you have to do your best to mimic some security requirements as well. You can only use it at your home. You can't use it at your office. You have to have a locked door to be able to exit a room with a locked door. It has to be not facing a window, so some other things. You do have to make your space available for visual checks via a Zoom call or something, and then you have to agree to the same requirements that we would have inside the lab, which include not having an internet device with you and things like that. And you would use this two-factor authentication. So you would need access to a smartphone to be able to do that because you need access to that two-factor authentication. And that's all I have. I have some resources here. I have a little bit about this linkage infrastructure if you want to see some more of that. And that's literally the end. So I'm happy to take as many questions as you have. I'm not sure the best slide to leave up. Maybe this one, but please let me know if you have questions. I think my slides are available and I'm happy to send them out. I'm happy to talk to you more if you have some specific questions about an idea or want to know more about working in an RDC. I'll stick around and answer questions.
Yeah, and I'll just, please reach out to either us or administrators at the most obvious FSRDC location for you. It's really the best way to get started. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Safe travels.